There are two people I want you to picture. The first one wakes up on a Monday and reaches for their phone before their feet even hit the floor. Not because they're curious, because their body already knows what this means. A balance check. A tiny jolt of panic. A quiet little please be enough before the day even starts. They've got a 9:00 a.m. team call with a manager who somehow treats time like it's optional. They'll sit there with their camera on, smile when they're supposed to smile, nod when they want to roll their eyes, and keep their frustration locked behind their teeth. Why? Because rent is due. The car note is due. The credit card bill is already breathing down their neck. Now picture the second person. Same Monday, same phone, different energy. They check the weather first, maybe make coffee. Same kitchen, same mug, same routine they've had for years, but it feels like a choice. Not a trap, not a consolation prize. They might go for a walk before opening email, or they might not open email until lunch, or at all, honestly. They still care about money. Of course they do. But money isn't the thing drawing the borders of their life anymore. And that's what this video is really about. Not being flashy, not making it in some internet fantasy way. I'm talking about what financial freedom actually looks like when it's real, in your body, in your calendar, in your stress level, and the way you make decisions without that constant little knot in your stomach. And yeah, we're going to talk about the math too, because freedom has a number attached to it, a very unsexy number. But once you understand it, everything gets a lot clearer. So let me start with the opposite of freedom, because most people are living in it and calling it normal. Let's imagine a couple. We'll call them the Paredes. Two professionals. One works in operations, making $69,000. The other is a nurse coordinator, making $73,000. Together, that's $142,000 a year. On paper, that sounds solid. That sounds grown. That sounds like the kind of household that should be breathing easy. But paper is a liar. After federal taxes, state taxes, payroll taxes, and a basic 401k contribution, they're actually taking home about $8,350 a month. That's the money they really get to use. Now let's see where it goes. Their house cost $435,000, which felt conservative compared to what other people in their neighborhood were doing. Mortgage is $2,520, property taxes are $510, insurance is $175. And then the furnace gave up one winter, because of course it did. And now they're paying $90 a month on that repair, because life loves timing. Housing alone, $3,295. That's just under 40% of their take-home pay, and they haven't even left the driveway. They've got two cars, because where they live, walking anywhere is a joke. Car payments total $640. Insurance is $300. Gas is another $320. Transportation, $1,260. So now they're at $4,555 gone. What's left? $3,795. And that still has to cover student loans, healthcare, groceries, utilities, phone bills, internet, clothes, the random birthday gifts, the school fundraiser, the oil change, the dog vet visit, the subscription they forgot to cancel, the one dinner out that somehow turns into a $140 evening. Let's keep going. Student loans, $610. Health insurance premiums their employers don't fully cover, $410. Groceries for two adults trying to eat like reasonable human beings, $780. Utilities, internet, phones, electric, gas, water, $435. Now they're at $6,790. They have $1,560 left. And that's before car repairs, before home maintenance, before a new water heater, before clothes for work, before holiday travel, before saving for anything that matters. And remember, This is not a reckless household. They're not blowing money on boats or luxury vacations or design or anything. They did the right things. They got the degrees, they got the jobs. They bought a house that seemed responsible. They kept the cars for years. They tried to be good with money. And still, one transmission failure becomes a credit card problem. One layoff becomes a crisis. That's financial captivity. And it doesn't always feel dramatic. Sometimes it feels boring, which is worse, honestly. It feels like knowing your savings balance by heart because it hasn't moved in months. It feels like taking overtime you hate because saying no is too expensive. It feels like your brain never fully turns off because there's always another bill, another repair, another just this once expense waiting around the corner. You're not starving. You're not on the edge of eviction. But you are stuck in this weird little loop where your life looks successful from the outside and feels like a treadmill from the inside. And here's the brutal part. Stress makes you worse at handling the very problems causing the stress. There's research showing financial stress can reduce cognitive capacity by the equivalent of 14 IQ points. That's about the same hit as going a full day without sleep. So the person lying awake at 2 a.m. doing car math is also the person least equipped to make a smart decision about the car math. That is not a personal failure. That's how pressure walks. And if you think the system doesn't know that, I've got a bridge to sell you. Credit card companies make money when you carry a balance. Lenders make money when you stretched a loan. Car dealers make money when the term gets longer and the payment feels manageable. Banks make money when your mortgage gets bigger. Your financial discomfort is not just an accident. In a lot of cases, it's part of the business model. So when someone says you're approved, that does not mean they're on your side. It means the math works for them. Now, I'm not saying all of this to make you miserable. I'm saying it because the exact opposite of this is what financial freedom feels like. And no, it's not a yacht. It's not a penthouse. It's not one of those laptop on the beach photos that somehow gets used to explain a serious financial concept. Cute, but useless. What freedom actually feels like is way quieter than that. At first, people expect fireworks. They expect the big emotional moment. And sometimes there is one, but it fades. Psychologists call that hedonic adaptation, which is just a fancy way of saying your brain gets used to the good stuff faster than you think it should. Rude, but true. What doesn't fade is the absence of dread. That low-grade, always there financial tension starts to disappear. The mental noise gets quieter. The constant background math stops running in the corner of your brain. And you don't realize how exhausting it was until it's gone. Day to day, it looks almost mundane. You stop being afraid of your employer. That's a big one, by the way. When you have a real emergency fund, you can push back on something unreasonable. When you have serious investments built up, you can actually walk away if you need to. And when work stops being a threat to your survival, you start making choices based on what you want instead of what you're afraid to lose. A tire blows out? Annoying, but not a meltdown. The water heater dies? Fine, you fix it. Your boss gets weird? You don't spiral for 3 days wondering if your entire financial life is about to implode. That's the kind of freedom people usually don't talk about because it doesn't photograph well. But it's huge. And then there are the parts people really don't expect. 2 things catch people off guard when they finally get there, and neither of them is about math. First, identity. Let me tell you about a guy we'll call Daniel. He spent 20-plus years climbing in corporate finance, hit his number at 52, and retired with $2.40 million in index funds. The math was clean, the withdrawal rate made sense, everything looked perfect. For the first couple months, he lived the dream. Slept in, took trips, played golf, felt amazing. Then month 4 hit, and he started checking his portfolio every day. By month 6, he was taking consulting calls just to stay sharp. By month 9, he was working again about 25 hours a week, and not even sure why. What happened? He didn't fail at financial freedom. He discovered that money had removed the job, but not replaced the structure, not the identity, not the routine. not the sense of purpose. That's a real thing. A lot of people think they want to stop working, but what they actually want is to stop needing permission. Those are not the same. Second, spending anxiety. This one gets people all the time. You spend years training yourself to save, save, save. Then suddenly you have enough, and your brain refuses to believe it. Spending starts to feel wrong, even when it's completely fine. There's data showing 46% of American retirees describe spending as anxiety-inducing, and another survey found 64% of Americans fear running out of money more than they fear death. More than death. That's not a typo. That's just how deep the fear runs. So when the balance starts going down for the first time in your adult life, even if the math says you're okay, your nervous system may be like, absolutely not. This is illegal. Knowing that ahead of time matters. Because it means freedom isn't just about building money. It's about building a life that can hold the money without freaking out. Okay, now let's get to the part everyone actually wants. How much do you need? This is where the math starts getting fun, because it turns out freedom is more measurable than most people think. A lot of people use something called the 4% rule. The idea comes from research by William Bengen, who looked back at historical retirement periods and found that a portfolio mostly invested in stocks could support a 4% withdrawal rate over a 30-year period in the majority of cases. The rough shortcut is simple. Take your yearly spending and multiply it by 25. That's your freedom number. If you spend $40,000 a year, you're looking at $1 million. If you spend $60,000, that's $1.50 million. If you spend $80,000, that's $2 million. Not yacht money. Not private jet money. Just enough money to stop needing permission from every paycheck. And that's the point. The most important variable in reaching that number is not income. It's savings rate. That's the percentage of your take-home pay you actually keep and invest instead of leaking into lifestyle inflation. And this is where people get it backwards. A lot of people think the answer is just to earn more. More income helps, absolutely. But if your spending rises with it, you're basically jogging in place with better shoes. At a 10% savings rate, which is where a lot of people land after patting themselves on the back for being responsible, you're looking at about 51 years to financial independence. 51. If you start at 25, that means 76. That's not freedom. That's a long appointment. Bump that savings rate to 20% and you can cut about 14 years off the timeline. Get to 30% savings and you're around 28 years out. At 50% savings, you're looking at about 17 years. And if you can save 75% of your take-home pay, which sounds wild until you run the numbers on a simple lifestyle, you're down to about 7 years. 7. That's not retire someday. That's a completely different life. And here's the part almost nobody wants to hear. Spending less does two things at once. It increases your savings rate, which speeds up the timeline, and it lowers your freedom number, because the less you need to spend, the less money your portfolio has to produce. So someone making $85,000 and spending $42,000 is in a way better position than someone making $210,000 and spending $200,000. One of them is close to freedom. The other one is just wearing nicer stress. There's also something called Coast Fire, and this one is gorgeous. It means you've invested enough that even if you never add another dollar, compound growth alone should carry you to full retirement age. So let's say a 30-year-old has $300,000 invested and earns about 7% real returns over time. Without putting in another cent, that could grow to around $1.30 million by age 60, which means the retirement problem is already basically solved. They may not be fully financially independent yet, but the pressure has dropped dramatically. They can work part-time, switch careers, take a lower-paying job that's actually interesting, build a life around something other than panic. And that's a massive shift. Now let's talk about compound growth, because this is where the math starts getting a little magical. Charlie Munger once said the first $100,000 is a B word. And yeah, he was right. That first chunk is the hardest because your contributions are doing almost all the work. If you invest $10,000 a year and get 7% returns, it takes roughly 8 years to reach your first $100,000. And about 86% of that is money you personally put in. Your money hasn't started doing much yet, but then something weird happens. At $1 million, that portfolio is throwing off about $70,000 a year on its own at 7%. That's more than the median American salary, and you didn't lift a finger that year. The second $100,000 comes faster than the first. The third comes faster than the second. The snowball gets bigger, and then the snowball starts doing the work. That's the beautiful part of compounding. It's slow, then suddenly not slow at all. And real life proves this over and over. Take Ronald Reed. He was a janitor and gas station attendant in Vermont. Drove a used car. Lived quietly. No big lifestyle. No loud wealth signals. When he died at 92, his estate was worth $8 million, built from decades of steady investing, reinvested dividends, and basically refusing to do anything dramatic. No genius stock picks. No lucky windfalls, just consistency. That's the part people hate because it's not sexy, but it works. And here's why a lot of people miss it. We've gotten weirdly trained to confuse appearance with wealth. The person driving the shiny leased car might be broke. The person in the 2018 Corolla might be doing great. The person flexing online might be 3 missed paychecks away from panic. We keep acting like the costume tells us the truth. It doesn't. And that pressure to look successful can wreck perfectly good financial progress. Now, there's another trap that happens after people start winning. It's called one more year syndrome. You hit a number, and instead of feeling done, you think, maybe just one more year. Then you get to the next number and think, maybe one more after that. $1 million becomes $1.20 million. $1.20 million becomes $1.50 million. The goalpost keeps sliding because the mind that built the portfolio isn't always the mind that knows how to stop. Morgan Housel says the hardest financial skill is getting the goalpost to stop moving. That is painfully true. Because the number itself is rarely the problem. The problem is that your nervous system doesn't automatically trust it. So the real job is not just reaching financial independence, it's learning to actually use it. That means treating it like a gate, not a finish line. Financial freedom is not, I never do anything again. It's, I get to choose what comes next. A lot of people who reach FI keep working, but differently. They consult instead of staying employed. They take on projects they care about. They say no to the stuff they used to accept out of fear. The work doesn't vanish. The pressure does. And honestly, that's the goal. So let's bring this all the way down to earth. Because none of the math matters if you don't know what to do with your own life. Step 1 is getting a small emergency buffer in place. $1,000 first. Then work toward 3 to 6 months of expenses. This is not glamorous. It is not exciting. It is insulation. Because right now, a shocking number of people can't absorb a $1,000 surprise without going into debt. Last I checked, it was 59% of Americans. That's wild. If the Paredes had even $15,000 sitting in a high-yield savings account, their whole relationship with stress would change. Not because money would solve everything, but because it would stop every problem from becoming an emergency. A buffer doesn't just protect your finances. It calms your brain. Step 2 is getting rid of high-interest debt. Credit card APRs are averaging around 22.3%, which means every dollar you carry on a card is silently charging you more than most investments can reasonably beat. There is no clever investing move that outruns a guaranteed 22% drag. Pay that off first. Not because it's inspirational, because it's mathematically obvious. Step 3 is investing in broad market index funds through tax-advantaged accounts. Not random stocks, not whatever's trending on social media this week. Not the guy on your feed who found the next big thing and somehow always has a ring light. Simple, diversified funds. The S&P 500 has returned roughly 10% a year nominally going back to 1926. Low-cost funds like VTI or VOO let you capture that kind of market return with almost no fees. In 2026, you can contribute up to $24,500 to a 401k and $7,500 to an IRA. Set it up automatically on payday. And when the market drops, leave it alone. Seriously, do not poke it with a stick every time the headlines get dramatic. Step 4 is raising your income without raising your lifestyle at the same speed. That's a big one. Every raise, every bonus, every little increase in cash flow that gets invested instead of absorbed by a nicer apartment or a fancier car does two things. It grows your portfolio and keeps your freedom number from ballooning. The problem is not usually that people don't earn enough. It's that every time they earn more, they immediately find a more expensive version of their current life. Same stress, better packaging. Step 5 is the underrated one. Build a life you actually like now, at the spending level you can sustain, instead of waiting for some future version of yourself to deserve it. Because the people who get to freedom fastest usually realize the best parts of life are not that expensive. Time with people you care about, work that doesn't drain your soul, good health, peace. Those things matter a lot more than a fancier kitchen or a bigger car payment. So let's go back to the Paredes. $142,000 a year, solid income, respectable on paper, and still only $1,560 left after fixed costs before life happens. They are not proof that they messed up. They are proof that the system is set up to keep people busy, leveraged, and just uncomfortable enough to keep going. That's why the math matters. Because once you run the numbers honestly, the picture gets a lot less mysterious. A savings rate, a freedom number, compounding that does the heavy lifting if you let it. The miserable first $100,000, the harder but manageable second chunk, and then the part where time starts doing more work than you do. That's the path. Not perfect, not glamorous, but real. The question is whether you're willing to look at your actual numbers, not the version of your life that feels nicer to tell yourself. Because financial freedom is not some abstract idea. It's what happens when your money stops making your decisions for you. And if this is clicking for you, if you're sitting there thinking, okay, I want my number, I want the system, I want to stop winging this, then I've built something for exactly that. A place where we work through the actual framework, not motivational fluff. Resetting your finances, building a cash flow system that runs automatically, avoiding the traps that keep people stuck, learning simple investing, and working backward from your own freedom number. It's all in one place, with people doing the same thing. The link is in the bio. Check it out when you're ready. No pressure. But if you're serious about this, that's where we're doing the work.